Alright, today I'm going to talk about an optimal focus of attention. So attentional focus in the context of sport and exercise performance refers to the process in which athletes allocate mental resources to cues, stimuli, or states. So external versus internal focus of attention. So the research generally shows that focusing away from the body and on the intended movement effect, or the external focus of attention, produces superior learning and performance outcomes than focusing towards the body itself, or the internal focus of attention. The benefits of an external focus of attention has been observed in movement effectiveness, so better balance, higher accuracy, movement efficiency, so lower muscular activity, greater peak force and faster speeds. It's shown better movement form, and then it's shown more automatic and fluid movements. So the potential for an external focus of attention to enhance movement efficiency is of particular relevance for weightlifting in the weight room. So for example, it might allow an athlete to lift heavier weight with less muscular effort. An external focus of attention has produced lower EMG activity than an internal focus of attention in many studies. So a lower EMG activity means that less motor units were recruited, which means that the movement was easier and it placed less stress on the muscular and the nervous system. An external focus of attention has also shown superior performance in peak torque, force production, and improved movement kinematics in Olympic weightlifting. So for example, Halperin in 2016 did a study on an isometric mid-thigh pull, and he showed that an external focus of attention showed improved force production compared to an internal focus of attention. So this means that utilizing an internal focus of attention when exerting maximal force can actually hinder your performance. So the constrained action hypothesis proposed by Wolf in 2001 suggests that adopting an external attentional focus promotes automatic and natural movement control compared to an internal focus of attention, which disrupts that automatic movement and puts a constraint on the neuromuscular system. When an individual focuses on an external cue, it facilitates attention to a stimuli away from the body. This allows an automatic behavior to take over, and it will improve performance. An internal focus of attention will constrain the motor control and in turn reduce your performance. So for example, exercises like the Olympic lifts, the clean, jerk, snatch, those all involve discrete movements performed in a sequence. So an external focus of attention can improve our inter and intramuscular coordination and allow us to adopt a single focus of attention throughout that movement. So for example, in the clean and jerk, instead of trying to focus on coordinating each discrete movement in each stage of that movement, we'll have a single focus, and that will be to exert as much force on the barbell as possible. So this means that as the complexity of the movement increases, adopting an external focus of attention can actually help us improve in those lifts. So another study done by Vidal in 2018 utilized external and internal focus cues to determine the performance on a standing long jump. So in the internal focus cue group, they were given the cue to extend their knees as fast as possible. And in this group, they saw that the participants had a lot of movement at the knee and recruited a lot of movement at the knee. However, it was uncoordinated with the ankle and the hip. This was compared to the external focus group, who had to jump out at cones in the distance. And they saw that they naturally used automatic processes to coordinate ankle, hip, and knee movements, so they jumped further compared to the internal focus group. This means that the internal focus group had cues that essentially locked up their degrees of freedom and made the movement uncoordinated, compared to the external focus group, which had cues that allowed them to automatically coordinate their own movements. So effective cues should be short, concise, and specific. The first step in developing effective cues is to determine the key elements that the athlete should direct their attention to. In the research to date, it has been shown that an external focus of attention works best when the athlete directs their attentions towards the barbell or towards the weight being lifted. This is compared to an internal focus of attention where the athlete is cued to focus on muscle tension or limb movements. There are actually a couple situations in which an internal focus of attention can be utilized. So for example, in bodybuilding, when you want to get a lot of EMG activity and focus on that muscle contraction, that's a good time to use that muscle tension internal focus of attention to focus on that contraction in that muscle. The other time is that since an external focus of attention makes movements more automatic, well, what happens when we got a guy who's just learning a lift, a novice lifter who's still in the early stages of learning? They still have to use cognitive processes in order to coordinate each stage of that movement. And maybe they have some locked up degrees of freedom, but it might actually be beneficial to use an internal cue if they simply can't get one simple step of the movement. So there is a little bit of leeway in terms of using an internal cue for a novice lifter compared to an external cue who makes the movement more automatic, but it might work better to use an internal focus of attention for a more novice lifter who still has to use those cognitive processes and coordinate each stage of that movement. Overall, an external focus of attention is probably the most beneficial when we're trying to produce the most force at the fastest speed and automate the coordination of the movement. However, there are some situations in which we can use an internal focus of attention that is also beneficial.